You are recognized to speak to your amendment, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Certainly in football season, you want to be from Oklahoma, not Colorado. So thank you for correcting the error. Let me begin with a couple of comments, and I have both a prepared statement and some documents for the record. And I want to thank my friend, Mr. Thornberry, for genuinely trying to solve a knotty. This is a real problem. This is not a manufactured problem. And he certainly worked in very good faith with us and has made some changes. We would like to go a little further, but I appreciate, frankly, the changes that were made. I want to thank Mr. Bishop, who also worked with us. Now, in full disclosure, the original legislation did not include Oklahoma. That was a change that we got. So I'm glad they incorporated, and the original legislation did not acknowledge any tribal interest here. And that was, again, a change we got. But we would like to go further, but I want to begin by acknowledging, again, the efforts in good faith made by Mr. Thornberry and certainly Mr. Bishop to try and work with us, and those are deeply appreciated. The stated purpose of H.R. 2130 is to provide legal certainty to property owners along the Red River in Texas. While the stated purpose is well-intentioned, the effect of the legislation stands to significantly diminish the surface and mineral interests of tribal nations with lands adjacent to and surrounding this portion of the Red River. H.R. 2130 will require Texas and Oklahoma to conduct a survey, the goal of which is to ascertain the exact location of the portion of the river currently owned by the BLM. It's all but guaranteed that in this new survey, it will result in a determination that some BLM land exists on tribal lands and will be sold via 3 processes for disposal set forth in the bill. The first is to apply for a patent to the BLM land. The second is a sale based on a right of first refusal structure. Any remaining BLM land is sold via the competitive sale process. My amendment seeks to accomplish the following. 1, to ensure that the tribes receive notice of their right of appeal and any survey conducted. 2, to disincentive fraudulent patent applications to BLM lands that would hinder the process of disposal and the tribal opportunity to purchase. 3, ensure that tribes are provided with the rights of first refusal to the purchase of BLM lands. And 4, explicitly ensure that any survey and or subsequent purchase does not result in any diminishment or alteration of any tribal or surface right. I don't want to take issue with my very good friend, Mr. McClintock, who's good on these issues, but this is an area I know a lot about because it's in my district. So I've been there a lot of times, and I'm certainly acquainted with the tribal interests, and I'm also acquainted with non-tribal landowners who, again, have this difficulty in a knotty situation of claiming, determining what their land rights are. This is a little bit more complex than a 1923 Supreme Court decision. This land was not just owned by these tribes, quote, in time immemorial in some imaginary past. This was their reservation. This was land that was, they held by treaty right to the south bank of the river, which goes all the way back to that was the boundary between Spanish possessions and American possessions in the 19th century. And so when they were placed there in the reservation, they assumed that boundary. And so their interests here are long and well established. And just to be quite honest, they did not consent to their land to be opened up to white settlement and into allotments. That was not so. To say they have no claim because the federal government effectively took their claim away from them, allotted their lands partly to them, paid them a pittance, and then opened up the settlement to others, I think is to sort of ignore the sad and hard lessons of history here. And we don't think it's unreasonable to ask that on BLM land they have right of first purchase, which, by the way, they've said shouldn't be $1.25 an acre, should be full market value for the land, which would be around $1,500 an acre. And they're not saying they would exercise it. They're just saying that since this was historically theirs, it was taken from them. They think they ought to have on BLM land. We're not talking about land that's held by other people now. That's in fee simple. That ought to be. They ought to have the right to purchase that. To them, it's reconstituting part of their historic reservation. The mineral right issues are real. There is substantial income here, particularly given these are relatively poor tribes. These are not Comanches, Kiowas, and Oklahoma Apaches are not wealthy tribes. So them guarding their interest here, where they do drive some revenue and they have the potential for more, we think is reasonable. And to be frank, has been largely accommodated in the legislation, which again, I want to thank Mr. Thornberry and Mr. Bishop for. So with that, we would just simply like to amend the legislation along the lines that I outlined, Mr. Chairman, and be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Mr. Cole, thank you very much. Mr. Cole, at the time that the hearing was held, trying to look for a date, I don't necessarily see one here. Was this information provided to the committee that you were speaking about?
I'm not sure that the tribes were aware of all the information. And by the way, I do have their statement. Let me ask this quickly, Mr. Chairman.
Good. Without objection,
provide for
let's
the
put that
record,
into the record.
and
Yes,
that's
sir.
from
Thank
all
you.
three tribes. We also have individual statements that are arriving, and if you could indulge us, we'd try to get those to you literally today. Some of them just arrived. So again,
Mr. Cole,
these are
what we'll do is we'll leave the record open for the receipt of those, and without objection, those would be entered into the record.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. So I'm not sure exactly what both the author and certainly the Natural Resources Committee had. I know these things are difficult and complex. I don't know if we got them everything in time. We've certainly been notified this as it progressed, and again, I'm here at the request of the tribes that I represent, and they've got serious concerns. They've looked over. This has been their effort at amendment. They think this is the appropriate way to go, and so we think they ought to be heard and have their opportunity to present their argument and their case on the floor on this legislation.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Fox.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have no questions. I yield back.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Slaughter.
I have no questions, but I hope you'll make that, Mr. Coleman.
Thank you very much.
Any conversation, questions that might come? Thank you very much. Dr. Burgess.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Just for clarification, you used the wording of a fraudulent patent to the land. How would that be proven?
Again, you'd have to go to court to establish it. I think if we pass this, particularly without the amendment, there's going to be a great deal of litigation. Because it's not as if they're going to accept this. We'll be headed to court. I actually think that'll provide, in some ways, more uncertainty. With the amendment, we think we have a much greater likelihood of avoiding extensive litigation.
But there's nothing in the legislation that would prohibit that litigation.
No, I don't believe so. Not at all. Not at all. And I don't think there's ever any attempt to do that. Again, I think people here are operating in good faith. I really do, on all sides of this. And I've got constituents, to be honest with you, on both sides of this issue. But I do think it's very complex. I do think there's a lot of history here. I do think originally, again, entities like the state of Oklahoma and tribal governments weren't thought of here. This is a disputed area, and historically, again, one side would argue, hey, the real boundary of the Red River is on the south bank, because that's where it was when our reservation was created. That's where it was when Texas was part of the Spanish Empire, and after that, the Mexican Empire and the United States international border was indeed the Red River. I mean, that was the claim we asserted back then. So. Again, it'll take a Solomon to sort out some of this stuff, to be honest with you.
I would agree with you. There's a lot of history. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll yield back.
Yes, sir. Is there any other member that would seek time? Gentleman from Washington.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Cole, just appreciate your testimony and helping us understand that with the amendment you're proposing, would then passage of the bill right the wrong that is being pointed out here?
I think so. From the tribal viewpoint, they fully support the amendment. And in full disclosure, we certainly worked with them to try and arrive at something. But again, I want to tell you that my my friends, Mr. Thornberry and Mr. Bishop, worked in very good faith as well. And they may have a different view of this. You know, as Mr. McClintock argued, he would argue that this is an overreach and that real legal ownership started 90 years ago. There's a case to be made for that. But remember, those boundaries weren't recognized by the tribal entities involved here. They never consented to those decisions that were made. And again, they'd been guaranteed that land, you know, in perpetuity. And we as a federal government reversed ourselves. And it created, you know, an enormously difficult situation for them. It creates, you know, I would acknowledge, a difficult situation for property owners today. So we think this will let us sort it out. And again, there is a BLM claim here. There's also one other item I'd like to add that I should have mentioned in my testimony, Mr. Chairman. And this agreement covers roughly half the Red River border between Oklahoma and Texas. And I think to the 98th meridian. We have a challenge. I represent part of the other part of the Red River, too, where the Chickasaws and the Choctaws have claims. And they see this as if you do this here, then it's coming our way on our side of the river. And so there is a genuine concern. Now, this legislation does not affect that area, to be clear. And again, my friends worked very hard to make sure it did not. And in full disclosure, as a member of the Chickasaw Nation, I obviously have a pretty strong view about that. On the other hand, we see the precedent, if it's established for one half of the Red River, then we have mineral claims, water claims. We're in litigation with the state of Oklahoma right now over water. Texas has been involved in that litigation at some point and certainly has a direct interest. We're in federal mediation now. So we're pretty careful about claims being established along this portion of our historic boundary.
No further questions. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Cole, thank you very much. I would like to allude to the ongoing relationships between Oklahoma and Texas with great respect to the tribes that are there and both sides. I thank not only you and other members of the delegation, but also certainly our North Texas delegation that are involved in what I believe are straight up conversations that people have with each other. As I told you about this, I would hope to make this amendment in order. I notified the gentleman, Mr. Thornberry, to his staff the other day that I would be making this in order.
Well, I appreciate that very much, Mr. Chairman. Again, I want to state that the efforts have been very much in good faith, and I certainly regard them that way. And outside of our occasional disagreements on a football field in October, which you won, I got to tell you, there's no better neighbors in the world than Texans when you got problems. We've had a lot of help in our neck of the woods in tornadoes and disasters that comes right up the Red River, across the Red River to us. And seeing you extend the same courtesy to our friends in Louisiana and Hurricane Katrina. You got a tough problem. You want Texas as a neighbor and a friend because they certainly come through for you.
Yes, sir. But also we recall 97, 98, 99 with truckloads of hay that came from Oklahoma, Sooner Nation. We recognize that, and our cattle appreciated it too.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Cole, thank you very much.
Thank you.